Steelers by the lake, with the word to say. James Strong, Cody Tanner, host on the mic. About to dive in deep, keep it live, that's right.
Welcome to the Steelers by the Lake podcast. My name is James Strong, joined once again by my co-host Cody Tanner. Cody, how are you on this chilly Sunday morning?
James, I am doing lovely. It is very chilly. Took the dog out this morning and I was like, this is dumb. We had our 160-degree day last week. Actually, I think it might have been 2. But now we're back to the frigid cold of, I shouldn't say frigid. It's just a little chilly. But yeah, doing all right. James, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. Looking forward to talking Steelers and getting our first mock draft of the season from our special guest, Nick Pretzel, who joins us once in a while on the show. So excited to have Nick with us. Nick, how are you this morning?
James, I'm doing great. It's, as you said, a very chilly Sunday morning, but sun's shining, and that's what we like to see. So Steelers news coming right up because what better to do on a fine Sunday morning?
That's it, buddy.
Yeah. Before we go too far, real quick, a big shout out to our sponsors. We want to give a shout out to Edinburgh Hotel Bar. Supporters of Steelers by the Lake podcast include Edinburgh Hotel Bar, offering free buzzworthy pub trivia every Wednesday at 7 p.m., located at 100 Meadville Street in downtown Edinburgh. More information can be found at 814-734-5103 or at edinburghhotelbar.com. Edinburgh Hotel Bar has been a lovely supporter of us this year. Excited to have them and going into the new year because this is actually only episode 2 of this year. So we're very excited for another year with them, and we're excited to do more mock drafts. So today we're actually going to share Nick Pretzel's. But before we get that far, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're excited to hear who he thinks Pittsburgh will pick up. James, there's a lot of news to cover. Starting off with Steelers signing a new defensive tackle and you opening that energy drink.
What? I would never do something like that on the show. Let's talk about this, buddy. It's never too early for some energy, and it's never too early to add better quality play at the defensive line. It's something we talked about a lot last year. With the subtraction of Larry Ogunjobi, we knew some pieces were going to be added. We didn't know how many. We didn't know who. Now we're starting to get pieces in place, right? The first signing being defensive tackle Daniel Ekuale, formerly of the New England Patriots. He is 31 years old and just getting started in his career, really. He's been a backup his entire career previous to last season, where he started 14 games for the Patriots as a run defense specialist. Grades very highly against the run. Unfortunately, not a quarterback sack kind of guy at all. Has 1 sack in the last 2 years combined. Missed most of the season 2 years ago with an injury. So he might have a little bit more impressive resume had he not been out that season. But last year, a significant part of that run defense for the Patriots, and per Pro Football Focus, graded out extremely high on his run defense grades. He's 6'3", 310, short arms. Just not going to give you much getting after the quarterback. But when you're in those short down and distance situations, I believe he'll be an upgrade over Larry Ogunjobi versus the run, which is an extremely important thing for this team going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, originally started his career off in Cleveland, which is funny, back in 2019. Spent a year in Jacksonville and then the last 4 with the New England Patriots. Excited to see what he has to offer. The best year he's ever had were his first 2 years with New England with 2 sacks. In each of those years, one coming off a 7-game season, one coming off a 15-game season. So it looks like there can be a little bit of production there. Again, back then, I don't know how great that New England Patriots defense was, but he has a lot of talent around him in Pittsburgh on that defensive front. So excited to see what potential he has and what he could bring to the table, especially with that run-stop defense that we need to shore up a little bit this year. So excited for that. Pittsburgh also signed safety Juan Thornhill to a 1-year deal. Juan Thornhill being previously of the Cleveland Browns. Congratulations, you're on a better team already. I think
real high draft pick. Wasn't he a first or second round pick for the Chiefs back when he was drafted, Cody?
I'm gonna find out. I believe he was a first.
Yeah, I know that he was one of the top safety prospects the year he came out. A real athletic dude, a bigger guy. In my opinion, a huge upgrade. Second round, Cody's saying.
63rd overall in 2019.
Yeah, that's a really high pedigree guy. And when you're talking about the safety room, we were wondering who's going to be the top backup. To Monte KZ moved on. I don't think that broke a lot of hearts. He had better play early in his Pittsburgh career than he did the last couple of years, but his lack of size really showed up on tape. So we're talking about a safety that's a good 30 pounds heavier than him, and a very reliable tackler. So this is, I think, a huge upgrade and a very important piece of the puzzle. Now you don't have to prioritize safety as highly in the draft. Maybe you bring in another guy to compete with Watts, but I don't think it's something that you have to do as early otherwise.
Yeah, eight combined interceptions in his 4 years with Kansas City, 0 in his 2 with Cleveland. So
I understand schematically it's a Pittsburgh's defense and Kansas City's defense has a lot more similarities. So it was a real like square peg round hole kind of situation in Cleveland. It just didn't fit well for him at all.
yep, yeah. Steelers then also went out and signed Isaiah Loudermilk to a returning 1-year deal. That was exciting. We lost Larry Ogunjobi, which I don't think anyone here really cared about. But bringing back,
Oh, I cared. I was excited.
Okay, that's fair. We were excited that he was gone. We didn't care that we lost him. But bringing Isaiah Loudermilk back at least gets someone else in that room that already knows the system. That's the big plus there. I don't think Isaiah Loudermilk has had a phenomenal career so far, or even I would argue even a good one so far. He's been decent. But having someone in the system that still knows what's going on and has been around as a depth piece is very important, especially if we start dealing, knock on wood, injuries at any point with that defensive front. So, James, you want to go over the next defensive end we signed?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Loudermilk is a nice return. I agree with you. He's an adequate backup. Not a great backup, not a bad backup, but at least he's homegrown. He gets one more year to try to evolve. And it puts a little more pressure on Logan Lee, right? He didn't get a chance to do anything in his rookie season. So a lot of these additions are really bolstering that middle to back of the roster defensive line. And that should create some competition. So I like that they're doing that. The last guy that they added to this defensive line group since we talked to you last is defensive end Isezi Otomewo. It says he was a 5th-round pick just a couple years ago by the Minnesota Vikings. Height, weight, speed, athleticism kind of guy. 6'5", 282, 34.5-inch long arms. Ran a 5.0140 at his combine with a 35.5-inch vertical leap and a 9'4" broad. So very, very athletic guy. Plus side pass rusher. He's a better pass rusher, not that great against the run. That makes sense with his size. So somebody you'd want to keep on the outside. Maybe you could use him as an interior pass rusher in nickel. But we're seeing like stark contrasts here. This is a guy that's good rushing the passer. Equale, a good guy running on the run defense. Neither one of them good on the opposite sides. So you can see the situational, bring a guy in at a certain time. How do you feel about all these guys? I feel like we're cruising right through this, Nick, and not getting your opinion on any of them.
No, that's totally good. A lot of these guys aren't people I had been familiar with before. I believe I had heard of, I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, but the new safety, I'd heard of him before being a bit more of a high-profile prospect earlier on in his career. What I like a lot about most of these guys is it provides a lot of depth, and it makes it not as urgent to address some of these needs as high in the draft or potentially in this year's draft at all. I know there's still a lot of free agent prospects out there that could potentially be brought in on different deals, and the longer they're out there, the cheaper they get in most cases. So it really seems like they're being very calculated in who they're bringing in. And I think that especially with the guys that we've already got around these other dudes that we're bringing in, mostly on the defensive side in particular, I think that it'll provide for a really solid defense this year because of who we've already got, in addition to the guys that may have not had as strong of a production on teams that weren't as robust as the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this last guy here, Cesar Romero, I think that this is probably a draft crush that they didn't get a chance to draft. That's my guess is that a guy with that kind of measurable, they were eyeing him up and he went before they had an opportunity. Or maybe that was the year they took Leal, so they already took a guy and felt like they really couldn't justify taking another guy later on. So I feel like that's something that Pittsburgh loves to do. If there's someone that they wanted to get in a draft and they become available later on, they try to go after them and give them a chance to see if they fit their system. So I think that's the one I'm most excited about this group. But I like the quality depth. I think there's some upgrades in the quality depth on these pieces. Like Thornhill, I think is a pretty drastic upgrade over to Monty KZ, and I think that's something we should be pretty excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I think there's a lot of depth pieces, a lot of exciting things happening, and it kind of eases the stress with going into the draft.
Yep.
Is the big one there. James, we have two more guys to talk about real quick. Outside linebacker. Just kidding. You want to talk about him?
Just kidding. Oh, sorry. You cut out for a second there. Sorry. I just heard you say outside linebacker. That was it. But obviously, I know you're talking about Jeremiah Moon.
Yes.
So for those who are unfamiliar with the name Jeremiah Moon, Pittsburgh brought in last season. He was a late waived by the Baltimore Ravens while they were going into their playoff push. So it was just like the last week of the regular season. Pittsburgh put a claim on him. He was on the back end of the roster all season last year. Did get a blocked punt. So that was the highlight of his season last year. On the defense, he never really made an impact. He was a rotational guy behind Nick Herbig, behind everybody else at the outside linebacker position. So he'll get an opportunity to compete. The surprising thing for me on this one is that they didn't bother to tender him. He was a restricted free agent, so they could have tendered him, and he would have had to sign that deal or not play for anyone at all, and they didn't do that.
Yep.
And maybe he told them he wanted to try to look and see if he could have some kind of market on another team first, knowing how deep that room is. But that was the odd one there to me. I think that this might be difficult for him this upcoming season because I think that he would have probably got beat out by Julius Welshoff last year had Julius not been injured in that final preseason game. And now that he's been brought back for this upcoming season, if no other competition comes into the room, I think we're looking at a real serious competition between Jeremiah Moon and Julius Welshoff, who excelled on special teams and had like 3.5 sacks in the preseason last year. So I think that's going to be a really good battle to bring out the best in both of those guys. And will definitely do good for Jeremiah Moon because he knows he isn't just walking into it and getting the job. He's going to have to try his hardest to make the team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he does. Again, that block punt was huge. We talked about how he could turn into a pivotal piece from there. So, do you guys both
I don't
hear
know. I can.
Okay.
I don't know if you gentlemen saw what I just did, but I just shoved a big wad of gum in my mouth because I think Danny Smith is going to be thrilled to have that battle going on in camp, to have Julius Welshoff and Jeremiah Moon pushing one another to continue to fight for that roster spot. Honestly, I think he's going to be over the moon. So in celebration
Over
of
the moon? I like it.
Danny Smith being excited, I got a big wad of gum in my mouth for our special teams coach.
Hey, there we go. The last guy we're going to talk about here real quick is cornerback James Pierre, also returning on a one-year deal. James Pierre being an exceptional gunner and more than likely be returning in that role. He has a few interceptions, at least one that I can remember on his career so far with Pittsburgh. But excited to have him back again. It's just another piece. And he could very easily not make the team. I mean, he's probably at this point one of the first guys off the board if we draft somebody or if somebody else comes in or whatever. That cornerback room technically right now is deep number-wise. And I still expect them to draft at least one corner. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. Speaking of the draft, Pittsburgh also – oh, wait, go ahead. You're muted, James.
James, you're muted.
There we go. Maybe. Nope, still can't hear him. Not sure what James is saying. We'll try to get him back in here in just a second. Pittsburgh does send the house to Alabama for their pro day. I'm not sure exactly who. I mean, Jalen Milroe, they've been big on him. So I don't know who else necessarily if they're looking at. I haven't seen if they've talked to anybody. I think we got James back. We did for a second.
Yeah, I hear you.
There we go. Now we can hear James. James talking about sending the house to Alabama.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting thing, especially with the news coming out about the Jalen Milroe dinner, right? Now,
Yep.
this is not uncommon. Pittsburgh oftentimes takes that number one guy from that school out to dinner. He wasn't the only one. They took the star off ball linebacker as well. And usually that's the case. They'll take 3 or 4 guys, but the marquee guy is the one that you hear about. So that's a real interesting thing to me. I'm excited to see if they take any of these guys. There's a top guard there, Jalen Milroe, the highly athletic and extremely strong armed quarterback. I want to say he ran like a 4.3 something at the pro day there too. So really fast dude. And this off-ball linebacker is just a monster. Jihad something, I forget his last name, but just some real interesting prospects there. No big surprise that Pittsburgh sends that many people to go watch Alabama. That's a normal thing. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they usually send the house to all these places.
Yeah, excited to see that. I don't know how I feel about Jalen Milroe still. I'm kind of iffy, but again, you never know. I mean, look at how the Bills fans reacted when they drafted Josh Allen. Look at how people reacted when the Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes. I'm not upset if we draft any quarterback because it's a quarterback that gets in that room. So we'll see how that all goes and how that plays out. And sometimes they just do it to fake people out too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think a smokescreen is the biggest thing here. I don't think that they have any interest in signing Milroe in the first round. Now, if he's still available in the third or fourth, do you take a flyer on the kid? I don't see why not. But I'd be more interested in the fourth than I would the third because I feel like your third round pick, you can still get a starting player.
Yep. James, it's that time. Nick is about to share his mock draft with us. So we're very excited for this. Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, gentlemen. I greatly appreciate it. So, starting off the mock draft for the year, I got to defend my title last year when we did our mock draft extravaganza. I had the most correct draft picks. So, I'm defending my title here, and hopefully we'll get another one from James here with the updated picks now that we've done the DK Metcalf trade, so we can compare and contrast. I did a little bit of what I wanted and a little bit of what I think Pittsburgh is actually going to do. So we'll see how this goes. But in round one, I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to take a quarterback, and if Jackson Dart is available to them at 21. I, however, did not go quarterback because I don't want another Kenny Pickett situation. So instead, I took a guy that I'm sure both of you are relatively familiar with. I went with Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. He's got arms that measure in at 34 3/8. He's got 10 3/8 inch hands, weighs 6'4" or is 6'4" and a half, and weighs 313 pounds. And at that height, he was running a 4.95 40 and had a 10-yard split of 1.74. The dude is massive and he can move. And not only that, but he said in one of his pre-draft interviews that he likes to model his game after Cam Hayward. So it only makes sense to bring him in and let him sit next to Cam for a year or so. Maybe move Keanu Benton and have him operate in that space. But it would just make sense to bring him in, have him be able to be mentored by Cam for a couple years as long as Cam's with us. And I think Pittsburgh would be absolutely dominant on the defensive line with those two guys for the next couple years.
I love the pick, Nick. That's why I went that direction with my first mock draft. I think he's a perfect fit for Pittsburgh as a defensive end who can kick inside in pass rushing situations. So I think he is a dream scenario for Pittsburgh if he's available with that first pick.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think having that defensive tackle, especially the size, I feel like it's been a while since we've had a big boy like that. I don't remember the exact weight on Casey Hampton, but and this guy
He
is
was 298 as a rookie. Can you believe that?
that's crazy.
I have a rookie card of him. He has a flat stomach coming out of college. It's crazy.
Yeah, he put on some pounds to play that defensive tackle position very well. So excited to have somebody potentially like that get in the building.
Absolutely. And while normally I would have probably traded back, I know we were chatting a little bit before we started recording about how we really do think that Pittsburgh would benefit from trading back in round 1, even potentially into early round 2, just because of some of the depth at the positions that I believe are the most pressing needs for the team. We are not doing any trades in this scenario, just to keep things a little more close to what's going on at the moment. And maybe I'll hop on here for that live show and we'll talk some trades and see what we think there. But that takes us from drafting in the second round, which we gave that pick up to the Seahawks in the DK Metcalf trade. So we're down to pick 83 in the third round. I went with Travion Henderson, running back out of Ohio State. As much as it pains me to take an Ohio State player, they do create some pretty solid draft prospects. He's 5'10", weighs 202 pounds, and he ran a 4.43 with a 1.52 10-yard split. Had a 38.5-inch vertical and a 10 and 8-inch broad jump in the combine. He's able to be a receiving back as well as a power back, and he's got sort of the patient vision that we wanted Najee to have, but didn't always translate to the game. I don't know if you gentlemen caught any of the college national championship, but he was balling out there aside of Quinshawn Judkins on that Ohio State backfield. So it's a little bit of a prospect that slides under the radar because of Judkins being in the same room and taking some carries away from him. But I think that would translate really well to a tandem with Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, I really like that pick, Nick. This is the speed guy that we're looking for, right? Pittsburgh hasn't had a true speed running back since maybe Willie Parker. And this is an elite kind of speed for a running back. You don't really see 4.3 guys too often, so a guy in a low 4.4s is very, very, very fast. So, really fast. Electric kind of guy and could easily be the workhorse in a couple of years if Jaylen Warren is not signed on an extension.
Yeah, I definitely think getting another running back in that room is very important, and I think that Pittsburgh's going to do it in the draft. I think at this point they kind of have to. The number of positions we have to draft is crazy. So I like the pick. I'm excited to see what Pittsburgh does with. That second pick I feel like it's going to be a big one too. So I'm very intrigued to see how they're going to handle that.
Yeah, I was hoping to take a couple different positions there, and unfortunately none of them really fell, and Henderson kind of slid down the board a little bit, not too much of what I think will be unrealistic, but seeing him there was, with nothing else in a position of need, was a pretty easy scoop up in my opinion. And I'm going to continue to push several more pressing needs down the line because, once again, I was looking for a corner. I was looking for an offensive guard maybe to shore up some of the depth there. But again, those guys just kept getting scooped up before me, and there were several runs on those positions. So I took a prospect at a position that I think could still use a little bit of shoring up, and that I just was really in love with the player and the talent. So I went with a TCU wide receiver that is not named Jack Besh. I went with Savion Williams because Besh had gone way earlier. Wide receiver out of TCU. He's 6'4", weighs 222 pounds, has arms that measure in at 32.5 inches and a 10.25 inch hand size. He's a big boy, and I've been watching some of his tape since before the Senior and Shrine Bowl, and Besh was able to shine there, and he kind of had the awesome story of, catching the game-winning touchdown after his brother had passed. So love Besh as a prospect, don't get me wrong. But if you watch the tape of Savion Williams, he's a Swiss Army knife on the offense. He's a big boy. He can get involved in the run game, both as a runner and as a blocker. And he's just electric when you put the ball in his hands. I think this would be an awesome playmaker to have on the team and could really operate alongside both Metcalf and Pickens. Might be able to rotate Calvin Austin and him in and out and kind of have two really solid guys to be your number 3 receiver there.
Yeah, you're talking about him. I'm looking up some tape right now, and I'm impressed with the way that he can finagle that 6'4" frame. The 4.48 40-yard dash as well at that size was very impressive and very interesting. So yeah, I mean, a wide receiver group that is already fairly deep at this point, especially when you consider Roman Wilson coming in, this basically being his rookie year all over again. I don't mind the pick. I think Pittsburgh shoring up that wide receiver room, especially when people have talked about, is George Pickens going to be a draft day trade? I kind of hope not. I think there's no point in bringing DK Metcalf in if it's not to help George Pickens, but very interesting pick. I think that having this guy would almost make it unfair for most defenses if he came in at any point in a 4 wide receiver set with Calvin Austin being the speedy, quick guy, and then the 2 beasts outside. And this guy anywhere on the field looks pretty dangerous to me.
Yeah, this is a nice option here, and I believe someone that Pittsburgh brought in for a pre-draft visit. There's been some interest there. Some comparisons to Deebo Samuel in his game as far as the physicality and actually lining up as a running back and taking real running back snaps. So the rushing that you mentioned, for those who haven't seen him or not familiar with him, we're not talking about like end arounds and reverses. We're talking about a guy who has literally lined up as a running back and ran the ball and is very physical when he does so. There seems to be a big push in Pittsburgh, especially with acquiring DK Metcalf, to be more physical as an offense, to not be out physicaled by the opponent. Bringing in a big mauling wide receiver like that, it's the bill, man. So I like that too, the versatility of you can have him on the field and the opposing team doesn't know if he's going to line up as a wide receiver or running back, so that can create some mismatches as to where you align him. He might end up with a linebacker covering him when he goes out on a route, and he's going to have an extreme advantage when that happens if he lines up in the running back position. So that can be a real asset.
He's also lined up at quarterback in college and thrown for touchdown pass. So
I was just gonna say I've seen him throw touchdowns as well. He could. So who needs to draft a quarterback? We've got Savion Williams. He'll be fine.
Just bring in Scatterbo too, and he can throw the ball too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So here we go.
That as well.
Just get a running back that can throw. Get a wide receiver that can throw. We don't need a quarterback. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Talk about flexibility there. Let's go ahead and see what you got next on the draft board.
Yeah, and speaking of drafting a quarterback, I was pleased to see that Tyler Shock had dropped to pick 156. Quarterback out of Louisville. He's 6'5", 219. And he is kind of falling in drafts, and I know he's risen up the boards from where he had been a month or so ago. But he is in some of the draft analyses, in some of the write-ups that I've seen about Tyler, they say that if he wasn't as old as he is, and if he wasn't as injury-riddled as his history had been, he would be right up there in the conversation with Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders, according to some analysts. So at this late in the draft, being as quarterback needy as we are right now, not really sure what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, and myself personally not having as much faith in Mason Rudolph as some people might or are happy to have him back. He did save Christmas when we beat the Bengals a couple years ago, though, so always happy to have a guy who can at least beat our division rivals. But Shock is a good-looking prospect. Again, more so of the injury history and the age that are really holding him back. And if he could potentially be a shot in the dark that ends up panning out, like Cody said, like at any point grabbing a quarterback, why not take a shot at the guy?
Yeah, watching some footage on him right now too, just because that was a name that I haven't heard a whole lot of. Shockingly good quarterback presence in the pocket, which was very exciting to see. So, yeah,
Yeah, he's had a really good pre-draft process, right? One of the few guys to actually run at the combine in the quarterback group. And I think it was like a 4.63, which is pretty impressive for an older white quarterback. You just don't see that too often with these guys coming out of college.
yeah,
So he's done everything correct in the pre-draft process, and because of that, is kind of a little bit more of a hot topic name nowadays as a target for teams in that like third to fifth round kind of area. So if you get an opportunity to take a guy like this in the fifth round, I think it's a real steal and great value. Worst case scenario, he could be a high quality backup for your team for the next 4 years. But I think there is possible potential of developing into more than that.
Absolutely. And the draft prospect on Shock in on the NFL's website does say good backup with the potential to draft into a starter. So the NFL views him in the exact same way, which is really promising when you can take a shot at a guy in the fifth round, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
With pick 185, I finally decided to address the cornerback room. Upton Stout was not there, a guy that I know that we has been talked about before on the show, and the guy that I had been looking into if he had been there. But the top corner prospect that was left was Justin Wally, I believe is how his last name is pronounced. Cornerback out of Minnesota. He's 5'10", 190, so slighter guy. Got 30 and 3/4 inch arms and 10-inch hands. Ran a 4.4 40 with a 152 10-yard split. Didn't test anywhere else that I could find in the combine results.
Nope.
But they listed him as a very willing run defender, which is something that I'm always happy to see out of the cornerbacks, and especially with Pittsburgh's struggle against the run last year a little bit. It's always good to have some guys in the secondary who are able to diagnose and willing to attack the run. So I think a lot of the issues that I saw in some of the analysis of Wally was a bit of just like technique issues. Like he's not the best at tackling in certain ways and doesn't really know how to maneuver. And some of that is due to his slighter frame, I believe. But there's always the potential to bulk up and refine technique. And this would be a lump of clay kind of guy that could add to the depth chart and provide some competition, maybe for a Beanie Bishop or somebody already on the roster that might need to then work a little harder to retain their spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that Pittsburgh takes a shot in the corner room once again. I like what they did in the offseason, bringing in Darius Slay, even the Eccles kid. I think there's some potential there with him too. But you don't want to end up in a situation where you're starting James Pierre again. So I want to see some competition for him. He's an excellent gunner on special teams on punt coverage, but you don't want him out there as a starting corner. So any competition that you can bring into that room for him, for Beanie Bishop, for those back of the roster kind of guys, I'm all for getting upgrades in that area.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Pittsburgh, another shot needs to be taken, like James said, another shot at a cornerback. Someone to come in and compete and at least make, if not come out and be a starter themselves, at least push these other guys to play a little bit better.
And speaking of bringing in some depth to push guys to play a little better, I brought in with pick 229, the final pick that we have on the books, Xavier Truss, the offensive guard, is what he is listed as out of Georgia. But the main reason I was interested in Truss, because there were a few guards that are listed a little bit higher on a lot of people's draft boards, is that Truss has a lot of versatility on the O-line. I know he's at least played left tackle or left guard and right tackle. So he's got the ability to sort of move around the line, which is always a good thing to have, especially when there's experience doing so, rather than just saying, oh, yeah, we think this guy could shift over here or kick out over there. There were some concerns with his lateral agility in shifting around the line, but he is 6'7", 309 pounds, 33-inch arms, and ran a 5.2 40 with a 1.82 40-yard split, vertical jump of 26 inches, and a broad jump of 8'7". So large guy, able to move around, definitely coachable depth piece, and somebody who can kick around the line if we need to when either Mason McCormick or Troy Fautanu are both coming off of injuries. And if they need a little more time to recover, you could potentially plug this guy in to be a backup for what looks at this point to be a little bit of a thin offensive line group.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
like
on
it.
board with that. I think when you're talking about late round picks and what Pittsburgh likes to do, this to me is very reminiscent of the Spencer Anderson pick, which is why I'm definitely a fan of your decision here. Anytime you can draft a late round guy and he has played in multiple positions, Pittsburgh loves that. Their history of drafting guys that have position flexibility on the offensive line, especially the later round guys that you know are probably going to be at least early on in their career just a backup for you. Um, if they can fill in multiple places, that's incredible. So that kind of size and frame, I think, would be awesome. And you'd love to have a guy like him next to Spencer Anderson as a top reserve offensive lineman. So I think that'd be an excellent addition to the team.
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm right there with you. Oh no, I unplugged it. Having someone, I think you're hitting all the things that Pittsburgh needs. You know what I mean? The things that Pittsburgh needs to draft. I don't expect Pittsburgh to draft a tight end this year. I don't expect Pittsburgh to draft a tackle this year. I don't expect Pittsburgh to draft a center this year.
Edge rusher. No.
Edge rusher. Yeah, definitely don't need one. We have a solid three-headed dragon right now. So, but everything else that you've drafted, high priority needs, things that Pittsburgh needs, and quality, in some way, shape, or form, going to add either a depth piece or a potential starter year one. So I like all the picks. So.
Yeah, I think you did a real nice job with this, Nick. I think if Pittsburgh ends up with this haul, we should be pretty happy about that.
Yeah. Real quick, run through those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So at pick 21, we took Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. Pick 83, I have the Steelers going Travion Henderson, running back from the OHIO. Savion Williams went at pick 123, wide receiver out of TCU, who's a bit of a Swiss Army knife and can really line up anywhere at offense. Throw him at tight end if you want to. Pick 156, Tyler Shock, quarterback from Louisville. Pick 185 was Justin Wally, corner out of Minnesota. And pick 229 was Xavier Truss, the Georgia Bulldog offensive guard, who can line up in a couple of different slots along that O-line, probably as a solid backup and maybe eventual starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I like it. James, any final thoughts?
No, I like it. I'm excited. We're getting closer and closer to the draft, about a month away from it now. So that time of year where you get to see us really geek out about all this stuff. So we're going to continue getting mock drafts to you. Cody's got a pretty awesome idea for next week's episode. You want to share that with the people, Cody?
Yeah, we'd love to do a live mock draft. And I say live in the form of doing it on the show and stuff like that. Maybe in the future, very soon, we could actually do a live one. We have that opportunity, an option with the new way of doing the show. So we're very excited for the potential options here. Look for that probably being the case next week. At this point, I don't know why that wouldn't happen. Of doing a show live on the show, as far as doing it so you guys can see what we're processing, who's available, kind of go through the thought process with us as we're trying to develop the draft class for Pittsburgh's 2025 draft. So excited for that. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Don't forget to like and follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell. It's free. It doesn't cost you a thing. Don't forget the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts make James very, very happy. And until next time, this is your host, James and Cody, and special guest, Nick Pretzel, signing off.
Peace.